All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is my pleasure to present Nick Page, who's going to talk about Google Design Sprints, and this is the last lecture of today, so please enjoy it. Please give a round of applause. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, it's on, okay. English, anybody here not speak Czech? Okay, we have some non-Czech speakers, so we'll stay in English. Yeah, I'm Nick, and I prepared a much longer presentation, and then I found out that I have 20 minutes, so I cut it down from 42 slides to 2. So the other thing is my whole presentation is I was going to introduce design sprints, but that's kind of hard in 20 minutes, so I would like to know from you guys, how many of you know anything about design thinking? Couple? Up, come on, yell. Shout, you're about to go to sleep, say something. Okay, so roughly a third, I'd say. Any of you know anything about design sprints in specific? A couple. Okay, so I'm going to do a really fast introduction to design sprints, and generally I'll just say that it's a subset of design thinking, so anyone who knows design thinking but not sprints, a lot of it's going to sound familiar. A couple of things are maybe unique, but they're easily adoptable to anything you want to use. So this is, I tell people that this is another tool you can put in your workshop. If you like it, use it. If you don't, leave it there. There's other tools that do pretty much the same thing. This one happens to be handy for a couple of reasons, but it's individual for the person and for the client. So let's see if my clicker doesn't seem to be working, so I'll have to click here. So yeah, my slides are a very short show. Oh shit, that's the wrong slide. Anyway, if anybody wants to take a picture of that, we can. I was going to promise sex and nudity, so we just had the sex. I hope it was fun for you too. And the nudity there is the brain. See the brain? Very quickly, design thinking was developed at various places, various times over the past 10, 12 years to answer the question that in big companies, those of you who understood and heard the last presentation, you heard some of this problem where big companies have a problem of getting ideas and then doing something with it. You get some great employees, or maybe you go to a company, they deliver you something, it's the greatest thing on earth, it's going to save the company, everybody's going to get rich. The company says, thank you, now we'll put it into our 2-year production plan. In which case, it's instantly dead. There is nothing innovative about something that has to sit there for 2 years. I also happened to work at the same bank. I was part of the same team until about 1.5 years ago, and I decided to say, fuck it, I'm going off on my own, because I like doing things that actually had a chance of working, and these guys did a miracle to pull off the API thing at Spořitelna, because it's one of the few things that actually got through. And it really was amazing that they got it going. Design sprints, human-centered design and design thinking in general can itself be a very long and expensive and resource-intensive process. Human-centered design, for instance, is a process that is good for huge problems. It can solve really big things, but it usually takes months, and it takes a lot of dedication from the company. It might take 10 people from the company who work a full day every week for months on that particular problem, plus they do homework between those weeks, and they end up without much time to do the job that they normally do. So it's something that managers don't tend to like very much, because, like I said, it's a big investment, the outcome is uncertain. Design sprints partly answer that. A classic design sprint that's product-oriented, there's different kinds, but basically the thing that mostly is pushed in the book, Design Sprints, if you read it, is a solution-oriented thing, usually a product, maybe a web page, maybe a new service model. This is a process that takes 5 days, and you should have about 7 people from the company in that for the whole time. Sounds like a lot. You have to talk managers into that, but it really is a very short, definite, finite, very well encapsulated thing you can try to sell him on, instead of, well, it's going to take, 10 weeks, 3 months, maybe 6 months, and maybe we'll have something, right? So it's easy. It's an easier model to sell. There's a couple of other advantages that I really like that are important in the design sprint model that could be important anywhere else, but they tend not to be as emphasized, at least in my experience. Maybe it's just what I've seen. The first thing that I really like about design sprints is an emphasis on part of the design team, the sprint team from the company. There should be a manager, somebody who is a decision maker, who has the political power and the budget to say that once we finish this sprint, if we believe in the product, you, and you are no longer working on what you worked on last week, you're working for me, and here's the money, and here's your job starting Monday, go, right? That is a very important thing. That answers the problem that I identified earlier, that the company says, great idea, we'll stick it in our pipeline, maybe 2 years down the road, something will happen with it. This, is an attempt. It doesn't always work, but it's an attempt to answer that problem. Pardon me. If you can do that, the enthusiasm from the sprint carries forward for a longer time and gets actually translated into the solution attempt. And that in itself is super valuable. The other thing is that this 5-day model, in these 5 little segments here, you can shorten that a little bit. You can make it maybe 3 days, sometimes 2 days, but I'm going to keep talking about it as if the 5-day model, because it's a little easier. There's a whole bunch of homework that the sprint master has to do here in the week or maybe month beforehand, right? So yeah, there's a lot more prep that goes into it, I think. And the people involved in the company, sometimes they're involved in the prep. It's looser, it's not a very huge commitment, but they might be involved in it. When we start, day one, understand, this is a classic design thinking process. We all have to figure out what the issue is that we're trying to solve. We sit down and we start with a thought that say, hey, we want a better customer service model for young mothers, let's say, or whatever, drivers that like to go too fast. We figure out who it's for and roughly, very vaguely, what we're trying to get at. We're trying to identify some problems that we want. We don't look at solutions. We're trying to think of young mothers don't have enough time on their hands. The drivers get too many tickets, or their tires give out too quickly. We think of the issues, the problems we're trying to solve. That's an important thing to focus on. During the understand phase, we open up with what we call the lightning talks, which are 10, 15-minute talks about information we need to give the team. That might be to actually inform people. That might be marketing, talking to tech people, or tech people talking to the finance guys, or whatever. We just want to give them a vague, key, bullet point stuff to think about. We don't want to get into details in 10, 15 minutes. And usually the details are lost on those people anyway. They don't know enough to understand them. Sometimes we can pull in people from the outside, and I'll bring in an expert who is going to tell us about some new market that we don't have the expertise inside. And sometimes it might be from, on Skype or whatever. I try to keep the lightning talks to have several people who are in the sprint so that we keep that information and the person right there. But anyway, they're verbal. We don't give people a lot to read because nobody reads the shit anyway, right? They say they do, they looked at a couple of the title headers, they scanned it, but they don't have the information. This way, unless somebody's sleeping, like this guy over here, or looking at his phone, you know that at least I did my best effort to wake you up, to get there, right? I can sometimes give supplemental information if I need to give a list of details or a spreadsheet. I obviously know you're not going to memorize it. I'm not going to even present it. I'll just say, here you go. You can look at the details if you want to refer to it during the week, right? The end of that time, the end of that day, we try to come up with the design challenge, which will be our phrase, our sentence maybe, that's going to lead us for the rest of the week. When you see it, it looks very unimpressive. It's how might we serve young mothers, get more time on their hands, or whatever. How might we use our basic product line to achieve some goal? But the thought and the information that went into developing that sentence is actually pretty difficult. It's a lot of work. And getting the right sentence is important. If you get it too broad, you have no focus. If you get it too narrow, it suggests only one or two solutions so that you have no creativity. So it's kind of a difficult thing to do, even though the end result is like, what, one sentence? You spent all day, 10 people working on this? Anyway, that's life. The next two stages, sketch and decide, those are classic design thinking. Those, if anybody's done those creative workshops where you have a whole bunch of post-it notes on the wall, that's basically it, right? People come to sit down, everybody works alone to try to sketch. Ideally, you draw things. You try to sketch as many solutions as you can. We are not looking for quality. We are not looking for depth. We are not looking even for originality. We are looking for sheer number of things that could work. And some of them can be really stupid. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Because even the stupid things or the impossible things can inspire you to go further, okay? That's all we're looking for. People should work alone. That's an important part, because if they work in groups, you generally find out what the strongest personality in that group thinks is a good idea, but you pay for it 5 or 6 times the number of people in that group. It's usually not a great idea for the creative part to work in a group like that. And even if everybody draws 50% of the same ideas, that's fine too, because then you know that that's probably a pretty good direction to go. The original ones might inspire you to something really new and different. So all of these things have their value. One quick story from when I was working at that same bank, at Spořitelna. We were doing a creative workshop on something. Basically, we were trying to figure out ways of getting people to pay with their cards in this country more often. This is a fairly high cash, low electronic payment country compared to others. And so we're coming up with all kinds of very basic, very, very non-innovative, but probably corporate acceptable ideas. And then we're just sitting around having some coffee, shooting the shit, and somebody just said, what would people really want from a bank? Well, we just said, well, they probably want the bank to pay for everything. Very funny. But so we're sitting there, you know, and in about 10, 15, 20 minutes, something like that, we came up with an idea that I'll tell you the end of it. I don't even remember the process at this point. But anyway, we ended up with an idea that what if we did a contest where every month the bank chooses 1 or 10 or 100, some number of people, and say you win your last month's expenditures on your card times 12. We will give you a year of life for free. The bank will pay for everything on the card for free. It'll be based on what you spent last month. So if you spent $5 on your card, you'll get $5 times 12. If you spent $500, you'll get a bit more money. And we thought that this is actually something that could be done. We looked at how much people actually, our target market, spend on their cards, and we saw that most of them spend 2, 3, maybe 4,000 crowns, occasionally a little bit more than that. But families in our basic class of clients at the bank didn't have more free cash. Most of their money just went straight to rent, straight to electricity and all of that. So the risk to the bank was actually fairly low. And even if someone happened to win a lot, that would only look good. That would be good media. But the most of the winners would be winning 60,000 crowns a year. That's something that the bank could easily afford for cheap marketing. And if you don't remember this idea, you could try to push it again. I'll give it to you for free again. Anyway, the bank didn't take this. I'm not quite sure why, because it seems like a pretty logical, simple, cheap, and very customer approved, a happy thing, a good thing for the people. They wouldn't have to do anything differently except whip out the card a little more often instead of using cash. And they would basically change their habits and learn that they don't have to go to the ATM and all of these things. They would learn the benefits of cashless spending. So anyway, that's just the point. That point of that discussion was to simply mention to you that even wacky, impossible ideas can be very useful. So now, at the end of day 2, we get to the day 3, where we take all of these hundreds of ideas, and our goal, we always say we want 100 ideas on the wall. We usually have 30, maybe 50. But if we get them all over the place, you group them, and you can group them however you want. You can copy the ideas and put the same idea in 10 groups if you want. It doesn't matter. Whatever makes sense to the people working. And you basically start narrowing it down, right? So that by the end of that day, ideally, you've got one idea that the team believes is what we want to go forward with, okay? And we get to here the prototype phase, which I think is the other, some people see it as a disadvantage. I think it's a huge advantage. The prototype phase is that the group in the room, the sprint team itself, has to develop a prototype there on the spot in one day. I've been in a couple of prototyping sessions that have gone beyond 12 hours. Theoretically, you could have a 24-hour day if you want, but it needs to be done in one day, and it needs to be done by that group. Unless you have some really extraordinary reasons to pull in an outside expert just for the prototype, you know, I would allow it if there was some really amazing reasons for it, but basically, you don't want to do that. It means you have to teach someone what the thoughts behind it are. It gets very messy. But since the team knows that that on day 4, they're going to be building the prototype there themselves, it limits and focuses your thinking on what you're going to prototype. Another problem of some of these creative workshops is people get just way too creative, and the ideas go all over the place. We one time started with a product that was very simple, a simple one thought, one key idea for kids, all targeted. By the time we actually started working on it, we had 70 pages of prototypes to work on, right? Everybody had great ideas, had to make it this way, had to add complexity here. Our psychological team thought we needed that, and it got crazy, right? So our minimum viable product was 70 pages of prototyping on Axure, for anyone who knows that. And it was pretty crazy. There's no way you're going to do that in one day. So you know that maximally you're going to have a couple of pages that you'll have. The prototype itself can look like anything that works. You're going to use it for testing on the final day. It doesn't need to be functional. It can be a drawing. You can use technical skills in the room, and if there's only 1 or 2 people in the room who can actually build the prototype, the other people can be doing other things that help, like arranging for the test group on the next day. They can be putting together information so that we have the final documentation for the product, for the project, the sprint ready, and all this kind of stuff. They're doing various things that aren't directly related to the prototype. But what's important is that everybody's working together and everyone's available so that if there's one person or 2 or 3 people doing the prototype, they can ask right away, hey, you know, what did we say about this? And the whole team is right there. The discussion is open. We don't ever lose anybody. We don't ever have to educate someone again or make decisions without the whole team. So it's important to have everybody working, doing something useful, but it doesn't have to be exactly everyone on the prototype. And then on the last day, we do one of the magic things that I think is really cool here, especially as a UXer who spent most of his UX time doing user testing. We go out and test the damn thing, right? We find out from people, maybe 5, 7 people, get their reactions. Sometimes it's okay to hire a professional testing team because that's one place where you want where it's a benefit to not have the designer doing the testing. They don't have bias, creator bias in there. But it doesn't have to be. You can go out and just show your prototype to the people you've selected. The people that you're testing with should obviously resemble your target market as closely as possible. But, you know, limits, funding, everything else will dictate the situation. How much time have I got? Okay, about 2 minutes, right? So that's roughly it. At the end of the day, at the end of the sprint, there's 3 possible outcomes. One of them is that you've come up with something that is so fantastic, all your people who tested it on just love it. They said they'd buy 1,000 of them and they'll pay $100 for each one. And you have the absolute faith to go forward, okay? That's a theoretical outcome that I've never seen in real life. The more likely outcome is that you learn some stuff. Some of your basic principles are useful. You want to go forward with them. You want to do something with them. And some of them aren't that good. You decide to change them or get rid of them. And then the last outcome, of course, is that the whole thing is shit. You throw it away and start over or do something different. And that, unfortunately, does happen. It happens a lot more often than the perfect outcome. But even that is valuable information. When I was doing the Sprint Master Academy with Google, the teacher there said the goal of any sprint and the generic high-level goal of any sprint is to get more information so that you can make more and better informed decisions. It's not necessarily a tested prototype. That's one possible form of getting the information, right? So even if the information you get is negative, it's a successful sprint because you now know something more than you did before, and you can make a better and more informed decision about it. So that's a key thing to keep in mind too. And one of the likely outcomes is actually that if you get sort of wishy-washy results, you get some positive, some negative, one of the things you can do is schedule another sprint as soon as you can afterwards to keep pushing the idea. It doesn't have to be a full sprint. You can skip some other parts or shorten them, and you can do it again. Sometimes you might do 3 or 4 such sprints, and then you've got an idea that's completely you have confidence in, and that's where the manager magic is important. He can say you, and you, boom, you're working on it. Okay, that's the sprint. And it's also my time, I think, so does anybody have questions here? How do you prototype, validate, lottery? A lottery in 2 days. Time is one thing you can't simulate. That you can't do. You could prototype some of the principles that are different about your lottery than lotteries that exist today. I don't know what, this question doesn't tell me what key element is different. If I'm testing the same thing that exists today, I have to ask why I'm doing it. What's my competitive advantage against what exists today? But that we'd have to look at the differentiating factors, the key value. Anybody else? You can yell at me. You don't need to write. I like being yelled at. Did you have something? No? I guess that's it.
All right, thank you very much. A round of applause for Nick Page. So we have come full circle, and this was the last lecture of today. There's a closing ceremony in the circular hall, so you can head over there. And there's also going to be an after party, so don't miss that. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be here. You can ask me. Thank you.